Hey, what's up? Thanks so much for joining us again right here on A Frank Conversation. You know, we try to delve into a lot of topics, and this time, because it is June and it is Pride Month, we want to have a conversation about mental health. Mental wellness is everything, and to help me do that, I'm joined by Demetric Watkins right here. How you doing?
Doing well. How you doing, Frank?
I'm doing well, man. You know, you can find this right here on the 10 Tampa Bay Plus platform. And, you know, a lot of conversations about necessary topics that need to be further discussed right here in the Bay Area and beyond. So you're with NAMI.
That's correct. NAMI Hillsborough.
All right. So NAMI, what's that acronym right there?
So that's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the largest grassroots mental health organization in the nation.
Okay.
Over 600 state and affiliate organizations in the U.S., with 23 in the state of Florida, including NAMI Hillsborough.
And you just got back from a convention.
Correct. In Denver, Colorado was our 2024 NAMICon, which was the national conference for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Very great experience, very inspirational. A lot of great speakers and topics on youth and young adult mental wellness, talking about crisis intervention systems and first responders, advocacy efforts. So really just bringing everyone together, including, you know, supporting our veterans and caregivers and things of that nature.
All encompassing, right?
All encompassing, that's right.
Now, you've been at it for a minute. Anything really pique your interest in the conversations that you had at the convention that maybe you didn't get a chance to tap into completely?
More so just, you know, figuring out how we can delve more into community support, and not just what we can provide to the community, but how we can get the community engaged to support the mental health and peer support community.
That's it. When we talk about this from a pride standpoint, we had a conversation off camera just about how important it is for everyone to embrace everyone, but that's really layered.
Correct. It's very layered. Ultimately, you know, Pride Month is all about honoring history, you know, our LGBTQ plus pioneers, and just, you know, showing up for those in our community that, you know, are our friends, our colleagues, our, you know, sons, daughters, you know, what have you, our family members and friends, to make sure that they know that they have people rallying behind them. And from a clinical perspective, it also kind of combats that, you know, loneliness, which the Attorney Surgeon General just recently, you know, indicated was a new pandemic, and then also helping them and just improve their overall well-being.
Loneliness as a pandemic. Can you expound on that?
When we went through the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of us, we had no choice but to, you know, become isolated. We didn't have those same interactions that we had, like going to work and going to the grocery store, even going to the park. And, you know, they don't seem like big things when it's something that you do every day. It's a part of your routine. But if those things are taken away from you, then what do you have? So at that point, you know, if you don't have someone living with you, like especially those who lived alone or had family that were in different states, and, you know, we made do and we did Skype and we did Zoom to try to, you know, come together and socialize the best way that we could. But that face-to-face, one-on-one interaction, that intimacy, that was lacking. So in that sense, you know, it becoming, you know, a pandemic is because now a lot of people don't know how to transition back to what we were before the COVID-19 pandemic. And the reality of the situation is that it won't ever get back to that place.
Right.
However, we do have to figure out how to reintegrate ourselves back into what is now our new reality.
A lot of people isolated, and that includes being isolated with some of those secrets, some of which is very heavy.
Correct. And then also, you know, just another aspect of loneliness is talking about our senior population. And a lot of people don't talk about our senior population, but when you think about, you know, some of the seniors, some of them outlived their family.
Right.
Some of them have family who may have put them into a center, assisted living facility.
Forgotten about them.
And, you know, essentially have forgotten about them, and they don't come visit. So, you know, finding ways to make people who are a part of these different sub-communities feel more like they belong and have that sense of belonging to, you know, make sure they don't feel like they're alone or feel like they don't have anyone they can lean on.
What are some of the struggles you find specifically as a Black man navigating through the mental health realm of matters?
There's not enough of us.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. So there are not enough providers that look like me. And then if you want to add another layer onto it, there's not a lot of black male providers. So when you're looking at, that relatability level or having someone who looks like you sit across from you to help you, kind of navigate some of life challenges, have that sounding board, it becomes a little difficult to kind of navigate. However, there are providers out there who do provide, a high level of service. However, there is a great need for more, ethnically diverse providers in the mental health space.
And then, as we mentioned just moments ago, this is layered, right? So we're talking about black male care providers, and then we take it a step further, another layer, if you will, folks who can understand and are willing to relate with people in the LGBTQ plus community.
Right, and I think that one of the most important parts of that is to understand that individuals that are part of the LGBTQIA plus community, especially those who belong to ethnically diverse communities, they experience compounded discrimination. So not only are they receiving discrimination from society as a whole for being different or for being a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, they're also being discriminated against based on the color of their skin. So having to navigate all of that and then intermingle within these spaces if they're even allowed into certain spaces, because there are certain spaces that individuals from the LGBTQ plus community can't get into simply because they're a part of the LGBTQIA plus community, including the same if I was just a black man trying to navigate into a corporate space.
Really, those conversations, what do those feel and sound like from people who are sharing some of those concerns?
It's disheartening. It's almost numbness, if I can say that. It's almost like it's just expected. And although there are, different advocacy efforts to, improve those health disparities and, break some of those barriers and fill some of those gaps, it's still expected that there will still be discrimination and mistreatment. So it's almost becoming numb to the fact that this is just how the life is. That's the reality of the situation. But it's all about Pride Month, which is a way for everyone in the community, including allies, to support individuals from those communities, culturally diverse communities, LGBT plus community, just to make sure that they know that they're not alone, but they also have people who they can relate to in that space.
We had this conversation as well. As mentioned, there are folks who openly show support, their allyship, whether it be vocally or whether it be something they're wearing. You want to make sure it's not performative, right? And you also want to make sure that that support stretches beyond the month of June to other groups who need support, who need that love. What did that mean for you, and what does that look like?
So what does that look like for me? So, anyone who's not a part of the LGBTQIA plus community who rallies or supports, that is amazing. It's very, it's welcomed and it's very inspiring. However, for me personally, as an individual, being an ally to me is not what you do by showing up to a protest or by sitting in the audience of a panel discussion or things of that nature. Yes, that's awareness and you're getting educated. But my whole thing is like you say, after June, what do we do? You know what I mean? So are we a public ally, and then behind the scenes when we're having water cooler conversations, there's no ally or advocacy in that space? So for me, my concern when we talk about allies is always, well, what happens when no one's watching?
Right.
Or what happens when I'm not around? Are you still advocating and being an ally or allying for me like you would if I was standing there? Or is it just for in the moment, if that makes sense?
And then you make mention of the intersectionality, right? In terms of someone saying, okay, they themselves are a part of the LGBTQ plus community and they also happen to be black. However, the only part that they feel support from is the LGBTQ plus part of them, but they are all of those things.
Exactly.
But they may not feel that support in February, Dimitri.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, it's, when you think about it, and it's almost like two separate identities, honestly. Making sure that, I am showing up or presenting in a certain way during February, and then of course Juneteenth, and then also then showing up in a different way in June, the rest of June, which is Pride Month. So it's a lot of navigating different spaces. You know, they call it code switching, and it's all about psychological, sometimes physical, and mental safety. So when you are going into those different spaces, having to conform to the majority so that you can keep yourself safe in those spaces, that's pretty much a very big challenge and something that, you know, BIPOC, LGBTQIA plus individuals deal with every day.
All of that conformity, all that contorting, what does that do to one's psyche? Because you've just described a lot there.
Yes, honestly, it depends. You know, holistically, it breaks people down.
Sure.
It makes people feel that they're not good enough, or they don't belong, or something's wrong with them, or they're defective of sorts, which is definitely not the case. However, in order to survive, in order to pay my rent, or in order to, you know, get that promotion, I have to present a certain way so that I can build a better life for myself, when I shouldn't have to do that. I should be able to show up as myself. So, you know, for all members of the LGBTQIA plus community, is, to me, all I hear is brave and courage, and being courageous, because it takes a lot to be yourself when there's everything around you telling you that you shouldn't be, or that that's inappropriate.
Is there really you know, folks come to you for necessary help, and that's great, but they're not the ones who, according to this conversation, need the fixing. And you can't do anything about the world that these individuals have to face after they leave your office.
Right. So taking, you know, exactly what you said, so the individuals that come into the office, they need healing.
Sure.
Everyone around them needs education. So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, but I can only educate you if you're willing.
Right.
And, you know, ultimately being educated, or being aware, or getting that information or that awareness about what it's like for an individual living in the, you know, LGBTQIA plus community, does not mean that you are changing your own personal beliefs or values, or your own morals or principles, or, you know, your religious affiliation. This is human to human. We're not talking about all of the other aspects of your life who make you who you are. We're talking about human to human connection. So ultimately, if I want to treat you humanely, it doesn't matter whether you're a part of the LGBTQIA plus community. It doesn't matter about the color of your skin. I'm going to treat you like a human because you're a human, not because of what box you may check off on the application.
Those boxes, is that more about ego as to why people take it so personally, and some people ostracize loved ones who may have come out to them?
Honestly, I think boxes are for, I would say it's just another form of discrimination, really, is to really understand who's in the room, when at the end of the day, it's not about what box I check off, it's about what I'm bringing to the table. It's about how I'm showing up. It's about how we connect and relate to each other as human beings. But when you start checking off those boxes, then that's, you know, perpetuates the stigma. That perpetuates discrimination, because now that you've checked off that box, I don't know if I can be seen with you in public. I don't know if I can be seen with you in the cafeteria at school, or, you know, in the lunchroom, because maybe someone may mistake me for being a part of that based on, you know, some of the information I may have received, or misinformation I may have received growing up, based on, you know, generational information that's passed on from, you know, generation to generation.
Demetric, have you had folks come to you who have said, you know what, I'm lost and I need to be better, but I don't know how. I once viewed the world this way. Conversely, I shunned this individual because he or she may have come out, and I need fixing, or I need help finding the way that I should properly view the world through a better lens, a more clear, a clearer lens, if you will. Have you had that?
Yes, actually, I have. Actually, so I had actually two parents come to me.
Oh, what was that like?
It was actually a really good experience. They were very open, willing to learn. They have a trans daughter, and, you know, ultimately it's difficult for them. That transition, they're accepting and of that, but it's still kind of hard to rewire because for, I can't remember the age, but I'm just gonna say for 30 years, it's been John. And then now it's Jane.
And John is not the only one having to transition. As you're alluding to, the parents must transition into another way of living life.
Yeah, and I think it's a give and take of empathy and understanding. And when I say that, meaning give and take, meaning that just as much as, you know, that individual wants their parents to you know, validate them, to accept them, and to, you know, affirm their transition or their coming out, the individual also has to respect that the parents have to go through their own process as well. And it's not it's not always personal. So ultimately, you know, parents have to grieve. And people, and I think a lot of individuals don't understand that there is a grieving process with that. And it's not grieving that, you know, oh, my child is this or my child is that. It's more so grieving, one, what they had imagined their child to be.
It's the death of an ideal.
Correct. That's exactly it. It's the death of an ideal, but also understanding that, you know, what my child is going to be up against.
Yeah.
So, and I think that, you know, when we're, you know, coming out is it's a process. So when it's almost kind of like that true acceptance of who you are. So when you step into that space, like you're on top of the world, like I'm ready to take on whatever comes my way. But at the same time, you have to realize that the people that love you, who actually love you and actually support you, you have to give them time to adjust. And, you know, talking to those two parents, I let them know, like, you're going to misgender a few times. Don't be hard on yourself because this is still new. So as long as you're aware of it and you keep trying, that's the important part. Now, if it was just complete refusal, then that's a different story. You know what I mean? But ultimately, if I call you by the appropriate pronouns 99% of the time, I should be given grace for that 1% of the time because you've been my son for 30 years. You know what I mean? So I think it's just equal understanding on both sides, but everyone's journey and story is different. And like I said before, you have some who are, you know, parents who are supportive, they want to learn, they affirm, they validate, and then you have some parents based on their own beliefs who just kind of shun them. And, you know, ultimately it is what it is type of situation.
Who cares for the caregiver?
Therapists, other caregivers. You know, there's tons of support groups out there for parents of individuals in the LGBTQ plus community, not just, you know, when they're trans individuals, but, you know, just in general, like if they have a pansexual, child or, you know, a gay or bisexual. It's just being able to come together and understand what that feels like. And I think that, you know, a lot of people get caught up in the individual's experience. And I get that because there's a lot of discrimination, there's a lot of advocacy efforts and health disparities, but at the same time, understanding that parents also transition. They also have to go through some of those same processes, and being able to be in a space with other parents and be able to speak freely and safely without being judged or without being seen as being discriminatory or of that nature, because they need to be able to freely express themselves because they have feelings too.
And more specifically, the caregiver, the therapist. Who cares for the therapist?
Other therapists. So all therapists should have their own therapists. And ultimately, you know, we deal with a lot of things and a lot of, you know, challenges that come our way when we, you know, work with patients. But ultimately making sure that we are taking care of ourselves and that we're not taking on all of that emotional, I'm going to call it baggage, but loosely, but taking on all of that emotional distress that comes through the door and being able to kind of separate the two and making sure that we're taking care of our own well-being in the process.
Have you been able to take friends and family members along with you on this journey in terms of being a proponent for mental wellness?
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of any who don't, but it's been good. There's still, you have people who don't understand it.
Yeah.
You have people who don't care to understand it. But for the most part, the majority of the people who are close to me, who are near and dear to me, they're on that same realm, and it's really all about awareness and having those conversations.
Yeah.
And everyone's stressed. Everyone is tired, and ultimately, what's underneath that though?
Right.
It's not just being tired. It's not just being stressed, but how are you processing the stress? How are you coping with that stress? Are you exercising? Are you going for walks? Are you doing something healthy? Or are we starting to increase, or is our drinking increasing? Or are we turning to recreational drugs? So things of that nature.
Those are some of the symptoms. Other symptoms are quicker steps to the ending of one's life. Suicide is something that has become problematic.
Absolutely.
Even more so now. And you're having to essentially show people there is a better way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And and in my experience, individuals who unfortunately complete suicide, it's like a slow growing weed disease that eventually just passes away. So it's never really quick. It's usually a buildup of things, and feeling that that's the best way out, and not feeling that they have someone who can understand them, or even being in a space where they can even articulate what it is that they're experiencing. And then when you add mental health stigma into that, and if I live in a family where they don't believe in mental health, and I'm depressed, or
You just pray it away.
They're trying to pray it away, but it's not working. And then ultimately, if I want the pain to stop, it's either, and unfortunately, if it happens in a negative way, then it's either happening through, addiction, or it's, unfortunately, people completing suicide.
And of course, for our friends out there, 988, that 24/7
Absolutely.
Suicide lifeline.
Absolutely. You can call,
Suicide prevention
text,
lifeline.
or chat 988. Yep.
Yeah. Anything that you'd like to share that perhaps I didn't ask about that has taught you more about yourself in this journey that you're making with others?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned throughout my entire journey from graduate school up until this moment talking to you is that it's okay to not be okay. And you hear that often, but to really accept that and own that, I feel like it's a lot more difficult to do than to say it. To know that, regardless of what I look like or how I present or how many smiles are on my face, that it's okay for me to not be okay. It's okay for me to take time for myself. It's not selfish. It's okay that although I'm in the helping profession, that I may also need help. It's okay to, lean on my support system and not always be the one being leaned into, or feeling that I have to support everything. And the biggest thing that I've learned that has been the most impactful up to this moment is boundaries.
Boundary up, huh?
Yes, boundaries, and being okay with them. Because a lot of people, we set boundaries, but how often do we actually hold true to them? How often do we, keep our feet down on those boundaries? And ultimately knowing that because I'm telling you no, does not mean that I don't care about you, that I'm not here for you, that I can't support you, but maybe just in this moment where I'm putting that boundary up, I may not have the capacity to give you what you need.
And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Oh my goodness. we could be here for hours, but we both have schedules to keep.
I like to talk. I get it from my mom. Shout out to my mom. But
Shout out to mama.
But yeah, it's I'm very passionate about it, and especially when it comes to ethnically diverse communities, because it gets so highly stigmatized. So kind of like how I talked about that compounded discrimination that a BIPOC LGBT plus individual would experience. It's the same thing when you think about it from the aspect of just being in the Black community in general, and then layering that. So now I have that discrimination from society, and then now I'm having that harsher discrimination within the Black community, because there's this, like you said earlier, this ideal architecture of what a Black man should be, and anything outside of those lines is culturally or socially unacceptable.
Demetric Watkins, thanks so much for all the great
My
information.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
thanks
Thank
for
you so
hanging out
much.
with us here on Pride Month and hopefully beyond, because we'd love to talk about several other topics that need your expertise, right?
I appreciate that. I thank you so much.
No doubt. And thank you so much for joining us right here on A Frank Conversation. You know, you can find us on 10 Tampa Bay Plus as well as 10 Tampa Bay's YouTube page and all the previous episodes. Until next time, take care of you and yours.